changes unknown, changes talwa, changes tana, akapa yatia masifisa.
Welcome to episode 5 of We Are the American Indian. In this installment, we delve into the captivating essence and truth of the American Indian, exploring their rich cultural heritage and traditions. Join us as we navigate the significance of their diverse customs, while also shedding light on the historical context surrounding the misconception of the complexions and features attributed to the American Indian. Stay tuned as we uncover the vibrant tapestry of the American Indian narrative in this enlightening episode.
The current trend in ethnological scientific thought leans towards placing greater emphasis on racial characteristics such as height, hair color, eye color, skin tone, skull formation, and overall bodily features rather than on language. This shift arises from the understanding that the language spoken by a group may simply result from conquest or migration. For instance, in the United States, people of various immigrant racial backgrounds, descendants of French, Spanish, Italians, Mexicans, Irish, Germans, Scandinavians, Africans, now speak the English language. I did not mention American Indians because we are not immigrants, though we also adopted the English language as well. However, by relying solely on language as a marker, they might all be perceived as Englishmen. Nevertheless, none of these groups are inherently linked by birth or ancestral lineage to the place where the English language originated. Historically, emphasis was placed on linguistic characteristics to define a group's identity. However, the trend is now moving towards giving more importance to physical racial attributes, such as height, hair color, and skin tone, and overall bodily features, rather than solely relying on language as a defining factor of identity. Nevertheless, language serves as secondary evidence to complement the primary evidences. The reasoning behind this shift lies in the understanding that language, while an essential aspect of culture, can often change or be adopted due to historical events like conquests or migrations. As a result, people speaking a particular language may not necessarily share direct ancestral ties to the place where that language originated, such as the example I gave of the United States, now formed by a diverse mix of immigrants from various racial and ethnic backgrounds. Despite their diverse origins, descendants of many individuals in the United States today speak English as their primary language. However, solely using language as a defining factor might categorize all these groups as Englishmen, which overlooks their diverse ancestral origins and ethnic backgrounds. Therefore, the current trend in ethnology acknowledges the limitations of relying solely on language as a marker of identity and suggests that studying physical racial characteristics provides a more nuanced understanding of human diversity, ancestry, and cultural evolution. This shift allows for a more comprehensive exploration of human populations, acknowledging the complexity and diversity within societies beyond linguistic boundaries. Before delving into the diverse descriptions and depictions of the Aboriginal American Indians, it's essential to grasp the various terms utilized to describe their features and complexions. Understanding these terminologies will provide us with a comprehensive foundation as we explore this aspect further. In laying the groundwork for our exploration, it's vital to elucidate the distinctions between tawny and swarthy. Tawny denotes an individual with a brown skin tone, while swarthy specifically refers to a darker complexion or hue. These comprehensive terms provide an array of descriptive meanings utilized to portray the complexions observed among indigenous peoples, encapsulating the diverse range of characteristics attributed to indigenous people. Understanding these nuanced terms offers us a lens through which we can appreciate and comprehend the various depictions of indigenous complexions throughout historical descriptions and depictions. Examining these definitions necessitates contextualizing them within the era or time period when these terms were used. It's important to acknowledge that the understanding or connotations of these words might differ significantly from their present-day definitions or interpretations. The evolution of language and societal perceptions over time could significantly alter the nuances and implications associated with these terms, emphasizing the importance of considering historical context when exploring their meanings. in this exploration, it's crucial to delve into the etymology of these words. Let's commence our journey by examining the origins and historical development of the term tawny. Tawny adjective, tan-colored, late 14th century, from Anglo-French tan, over like the brownish yellow of tan leather, from Old French tanned dark brown, tan, 12th century, modern French tan, past participle of tanner to tan hides, from medieval Latin tanner, related tawniness. Now, let's turn our attention to the term swarthy and delve into its etymology and historical evolution to gain a deeper understanding of its connotations and usage. Swarthy adjective, dark-colored, tawny, especially in reference to skin. 1580s, an unexplained alteration of swarthy 1570s. From swart plus y, related, swarthiness. A swarthiness is attested from 1520s. The origin of swarthy can be traced back to swart, a term that is defined as swart adjective, Old English swart, black, being of a dark hue, in reference to night, clouds, also figurative, wicked, infamous, from Proto-Germanic swarta, so it's also of Old Frisian, Old Saxon, and Middle Dutch swart, Old Norse svarter, German schwarz, Gothic swartz dark-colored, black, from Pi root sordo, dirty, dark, black, source of sorted, the native Germanic word, surviving in the continental languages but displaced in English by black, also in Old English in reference to skin color of persons, related, swartness, swartus. To further explain, the term swarthy finds its roots in the native Germanic language, which has persisted in continental languages. However, in English, it has been supplanted by the word black. In Old English, it specifically referred to the color of individual skin. This word has related forms such as swartness and swartus, indicating different aspects or degrees of darkness in complexion or color.
You heard that song, I was country before country was even cool. Well, I was Nipmuc before being Nipmuc was cool. And it definitely was not a cool thing.
Well, I got out of our park library 3 county histories, or 3 local histories. This is the history of Worcester County, written in 1879. This is history of Grafton, also written in the 19th century. And this is a 20th century history of Upton. And so I just looked in there for you, Chuck. I looked up Nipmuc people and wanted to see what they said. So this is Frederick Pierce's book from 1879, A History of Grafton. And in here he says that the Nipmuc people over the last 2 centuries have vanished. So totally disappeared, according to Frederick Pierce. But I was looking at a census that was done in 1992 that said that living in Worcester County now, there are 1,400 Nipmuc people. So I was a little surprised. Why does it say they vanished here? And yet nowadays we have 1,400.
That's even more amazing when you consider the town of Grafton has the Nipmuc reservation there, the Hasselmanisko.
Right.
And that is a centerpiece of Nipmuc culture.
Yeah.
And has been for decades, centuries.
Right.
So why would they say that those people no longer existed?
Well, that's a tough question because, like you said, Frederick Pierce obviously knew his neighbors and he knew the people living at the reservation there. And why he decided to not call them Nipmuc people is really interesting. I think it has something to do with Frederick Pierce and other people's attitude at that time in the 19th century, their attitude about what an Indian was. And for them, what an Indian was somebody who lived out in the forest, who lived maybe in a little teepee or a wetu someplace, who mainly lived by hunting or making baskets. And as he looked around at his neighbors at Hasselmanisko, he saw them as barbers, stone workers, factory workers, shoemakers, and he said, well, these people aren't living the way I think Indians live, so therefore I'm not going to call them Indians. I'm just going to assume that they've vanished. And I think that's why in these local histories you don't find descriptions of native people as they're living, as shoemakers. They're not being described as native and factory workers.
Because that would go against our romanticized view of the Indian.
Right, they're not living in the forest, so therefore they're not Indian according to these folks.
It must be very difficult for people to overcome that kind of stereotype. The only way you can be an Indian or Indianness would be out in the woods, where how are you going to make a living and fit into society?
Right, so for Nipmuc people, this must have been particularly a difficult time to live because here you have a bunch of people in the dominant culture, the white culture, let's say, saying, you've all vanished, you're no longer Nipmuc people. And you have Nipmuc people saying, well, I consider myself a Nipmuc person. I have a family heritage, I have a set of beliefs, and I have a community that I live with that for me is distinctly Nipmuc. the same time you have the white culture saying, no, you're shoemakers now, and more importantly, you're a person of color. You're no longer a Nipmuc person. And that shows through in these county histories and also in the census records at the time. You find a person described in the 1860 census as an Indian. In the 1870 census, they're described as a person of color or a colored person. Same person, but the census taker, as part of the white dominant society, decides that this person is no longer Nipmuc.
There was kind of an ethnic cleansing with a pen going on. And it was, if you did not have white skin, you were considered black. And a lot of times, I mean, even today, you go into the town halls and you see where people have actually written over the records, where it was put in that they were Indian, and someone went in and wrote black over it. And you can actually see in censuses from time to time where they may have been Indian in the first 3 censuses, and then the last 6 of their life, they're considered black. But you also notice something else on those censuses, that they were together here, and they're still together here. It hasn't mattered what people have decided to do, you know, how they wanted to do what they wanted to do. We've stuck together.
Beneath the myth of disappearance that is in all of these published books from the early 1800s on, beneath that is the fact of the Indian presence. And the very same books that will say the Indians disappeared will then proceed to tell you all about the Indians that they know that are part of their communities. And what is abundantly clear through the secondary sources and through the overseers' records, the Indian overseers' records, is that the Indians never disappeared. They're always here. The Nipmuc presence and persistence is real, in fact, the reality. Over in Grafton, where the Hassanamiska Reservation is, which I should backtrack, there's, after King Philip's War, only 2 Nipmuc homelands were recognized as sanctioned settlements, Hassanamisko and Grafton and Chipanagungamug over in Dudley Webster. And the Indians there were assigned overseers to manage their affairs, which they did very poorly. But the Indians on the reservation very much had relationships with the white people who were their neighbors and their overseers. And the obvious bond of affection between Cornelia Brigham, the youngest daughter of the overseer over at Hassanamiset, and one of the Indian families on the reservation is the fact that the Indian child gave the white child a doll and some baskets that stayed in the family for generations. There was an obvious bond between the 2 children. And of course, both of them knew that Sarah was Indian, because she lives right on the reservation. And these facts are the day-to-day realities that they defy that larger narrative, but the larger narrative is what shaped the way the story was told in the history books. The Indians negotiate life around the white people. Now, how they do this is they work as laborers, field hands. They make baskets. One of the biggest, most visible reminders to us that the Indians never ever disappeared is their baskets. And every museum in New England, they probably have Indian baskets. What the Indians always had made baskets, but now they made them for the white marketplace.
My grandfather made baskets. And when my mother was a child, he would make baskets. He would make cotton baskets, and also he'd make small ones. So that's the way she learned. And then after she learned how to make them, and she grew up, and she met my father, and her and him married. But then she decided she would learn him how to make baskets, and she did. So her and him would make baskets every September when the cotton season come on. They would make a lot of baskets for the folks that was having the big cotton farms. And there I learned by my parents. they was making them, and well, I would sit around them and watch them make baskets, and I'd watch my mother split the oak, and she would split all pieces. She'd be losing some pieces. She'd split them and drop them, and I would pick them up. And sometime it'd be more than me after the oak, and we'd be trying to race to get the piece of oak, see what we could do with it.
Now, let's take a look at the book, The Voyages of Giovanni da Verrazzano, 1524 to 1528, on page 134.
They go completely naked except that around their loins they wear skins of small animals like martens, with a narrow belt of grass around the body, to which they tie various tails of other animals which hang down to the knees. The rest of the body is bare, and so is the head. Some of them wear garlands of birds' feathers. They are dark in color, not unlike the Ethiopians, with thick black hair, not very long, tied back behind the head like a small tail. As for the physique of these men, they are well proportioned, of medium height, a little taller than we are. They have broad chests, strong arms, and the legs and other parts of the body are well composed. There is nothing else, except that they tend to be rather broad in the face, but not all, for we saw many with angular faces. They have big black eyes, and an attentive and open look. They are not very strong, but they have a sharp cunning, and are agile and swift runners. From what we could tell from observation, in the last two respects they resemble the Orientals, particularly those from the farthest Cimmerian regions.
Now let's take a moment to explain. The passage provided is a detailed description of the Indians who he mentions go mostly unclothed, wearing only animal skins around their loins, along with grass belts adorned with animal tails hanging down to their knees. Their bodies are mostly bare, as is their heads, except for some who wear bird feather garlands. He continues to mention, physically, these individuals have a dark complexion similar to Ethiopians, with thick, short, black hair that is tied back behind their heads. They are generally well proportioned, of medium height, a bit taller than the Europeans, possessing broad chests, strong arms, and well-composed legs and other body parts. While some of them have broader faces, there are also individuals with angular faces among them. The phrase "they tend to be rather broad in the face" suggests that the individuals being referred to have facial features that are wide or expansive, meaning covering a wide area, particularly in the area of their face. It implies that their facial structure or appearance is characterized by a broader width across the face, such as a wide nose and or thick and large lips. They have notable features like big black eyes, an attentive and open gaze, and although they may not be very strong, which is a bit of an oxymoron from his initial statement, possessing broad chest, strong arms, and well-composed legs and other body parts. Nevertheless, he continues, they exhibit sharp intelligence, agility, and swiftness in running. The author draws a comparison between them and the people from Asia, specifically mentioning similarities in their agility and swiftness, stating,
They are not very strong, but they have a sharp cunning, and are agile and swift runners. From what we could tell from observation, in the last two respects, they resemble the Orientals, particularly those from the farthest Cimmerian regions.
He is clearly not talking about in respects to facial features. This descriptive passage offers a comprehensive view of the physical appearance and some behavioral traits of these Indians, providing a vivid picture of their characteristics and similarities to other cultural or ethnic groups.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Again?
My first time.
It's the third time. You got the weakest bladder I ever saw.
It's who's drunk that counts.
Who's right? Him or me?
You're both right. It is the third time, and you are drunk.
That's the trouble with being an Indian. You can't hold your fire wire.
Don't worry about it. Go with him, Luigi.
Now, we are going to take a look at the book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, by Ignatius Donnelly. On page 185, Winchell says, the ancient Indians of California, in the latitude of 42 degrees, were as black as the Negroes of Guinea, while in Mexico were tribes of an olive or reddish complexion, relatively light. Among the black races of tropical regions, we find, generally, some light-colored tribes interspersed. These sometimes have light hair and blue eyes. This is the case with the Tuareg of the Sahara, the Afghans of India, and the Aborigines of the banks of the Orinoco and the Amazon. Winchell's Pre-Adamites, p. 185, William Penn said of the Indians of Pennsylvania, in his letter of August, 1683, the natives are generally tall, straight, well-built, and of singular proportion. They tread strong and clever and mostly walk with a lofty chin. Their eye is little and black, not unlike a straight-looked Jew. I have seen among them as comely European-like faces of both sexes as on your side of the sea, and truly an Italian complexion hath not much more of the white, and the noses of several of them have as much of the Roman. For their original, I am ready to believe them to be of the Jewish race, I mean of the stock of the 10 tribes, and that for the following reasons. First, in the next place, I find them to be of the like countenance, and their children of so lively a resemblance that a man would think himself in Duke's Place or Berry Street in London when he seeth them. But this is not all. They agree in rites. They reckon by moons. They offer their first fruits. They have a kind of feast of tabernacles. They are said to lay their altars upon 12 stones. Their mourning a year, customs of women, with many other things that do not now occur. Now, I will take a moment to explain. Firstly, let us begin with the title, for those who might be unfamiliar with the term antediluvian. The term antediluvian refers to a period of time that occurred before the Great Flood. Ante means before, and diluvian pertains to flood. So, antediluvian literally translates to before the flood. In common usage, antediluvian is often used figuratively to describe something extremely old, ancient, or belonging to a distant, primitive era. It refers to anything that existed or occurred in a time long before recorded history or in a very distant past. To continue, in Ignatius Donnelly's book Atlantis, the antediluvian world, he references a passage from page 185 of a work by Alexander Winchell titled Pre-Adamites. In this particular excerpt, Winchell discusses the varied skin tones among indigenous peoples in different geographical regions. Prior to proceeding further, we are not examining Alexander Winchell's controversial and incorrect beliefs regarding pre-Adamites. However, when it comes to his descriptions of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, this situation is akin to selectively accepting valuable information while disregarding the erroneous aspects. Simply put, we eat the meat and spit out the bones. Winchell notes the diversity of skin tones among ancient indigenous groups. He points out that the ancient Indians in California, situated around the 42-degree latitude, were described as having a skin color as dark as the people from Guinea, referring to the black populations in Africa. In contrast, tribes in Mexico were reported to have an olive or reddish complexion, comparatively lighter in tone. This observation illustrates the range of skin tones present among indigenous populations in different areas. When people in the early 1800s referred to an olive complexion, they were describing a skin tone that resembled the color of an olive fruit. The term olive complexion typically referred to a complexion with a slightly yellowish or golden undertone. The term was used to describe a skin tone that was neither extremely fair nor dark, but rather had a warm, tan appearance. It's important to note that descriptions of skin tones might have varied somewhat depending on the region, culture, and context in which they were used during that time period. The reference to olive primarily indicated a warm, light to medium brown skin tone, such as the term tawny. Additionally, Winchell highlights an interesting phenomenon where among predominantly darker-skinned races in tropical regions, he mentions there were occasional tribes with lighter skin tones. Some of these lighter skin groups even possess features such as light hair and blue eyes. He provides examples like the Tuareg people in the Sahara Desert, the Afghans in India, and certain indigenous populations along the Orinoco and Amazon rivers, who shared a similar occurrence. To further expound on the term olive, we will look at its definition. Olive, noun, a small oval fruit with a hard pit and bitter flesh, green when unripe and brownish black when ripe, used as food and as a source of oil. A dish of cauliflower with black olives, the widely cultivated evergreen tree that yields the olive, native to warm regions of the Old World. Adjective, grayish green, like an unripe olive, a small figure in olive fatigues. From this, it's evident that he referred not to the unripe green olive but to the ripe, brownish olive, as he would have explicitly mentioned it otherwise, which also fits better with his description where he stated in Mexico were tribes of an olive or reddish complexion. This would suggest a brown or reddish skin tone, similar to olives like the Kalamata or the red Serignole olive. Moreover, this excerpt emphasizes the variability of skin colors and physical features among ancient populations across various geographical regions. It suggests that skin tone diversity was not confined to one specific area, but was widespread across different climates and locations. Winchell's observations contribute to the understanding that human populations historically exhibited a broad range of physical appearances, challenging any oversimplified assumptions about the uniformity of skin colors among specific racial or geographical groups.
Just so you know, Mexico is extremely racist. So we have what are like
Guatemalans,
even to its own Mexicans. So you got to remember, Mexico was dominated by the Spaniards. The only reason I look the way I look is because I'm 65% Spaniard.
Yeah.
Mexicans, like real Mexicans, or which is known as Mexica, not Mexico, Mexica, are 5'4", super dark with big noses and the heads pushed back. Aztecs and Mayans,
like Indians,
Indians.
Yes.
Well, we're natives, right? Yeah. So we're blended. So the reality is, in Mexico, till this day, if you are not light complected, somewhat tall, you're frowned upon to this day. And by the way, they're very open about it. It's not like it's a secret. It's not like it's a hidden.
Yeah.
You're short and you're dark, and we don't like you. So the fact that it's so funny to me that Mexicans cry racism when they practice more racism in Mexico than America practices on anybody else.
If you would like to express your encouragement towards these works and content, please go to paypal.me/SvnoyiWahya YT, or you can even directly contribute through Cashapp at $SvnoyiWahya. Any amount you give will be immensely appreciated. Thank you for your generosity. To Frank Hughes, thank you for your support.